He cried when they shaved his head, not because of the pain, though it stung, but because of everything it meant. The loss, the shame, the surrender. His tears slipped silently past clenched lips, catching the harsh light of the fluorescent bulbs above. Around him, the guards chuckled, low and cruel, amused by his reaction like spectators at a show. Somewhere behind them, a man leaned forward in the shadows of cell 14. He didn't laugh. He didn't blink. He just watched. Ethan Carter was 22 years old the day he stepped into the facility. The gate clanged shut behind him with a finality that echoed through bone. He hadn't meant to end up here. No one ever really does. One bad decision, one reckless night with the wrong friends, and now 18 months of incarceration. It was supposed to be a simple joyride. A stolen car, a few laughs, maybe a stupid post on social media. But there was a gun under the driver's seat, and that changed everything. He didn't look like the others. That was obvious. He was small, pale, with blonde hair that had fallen in soft waves before they shaved it off. His eyes were too open, too bright, a pale shade of blue that made him look younger than he already was. In a place like this, that was dangerous. In a place like this, everything soft was a weakness. The intake process was mechanical, impersonal. Strip, shower, uniform, line up, shaved like cattle. Ethan stood there, trembling, his fists clenched at his sides as clumps of his golden hair fell onto the cold floor. His shoulders curled inward, as if trying to make himself smaller, invisible. The guards jeered, not loudly, but enough to slice through him like razors dipped in laughter. One guard leaned in and muttered something vile, and Ethan flinched. That made them laugh harder. But not everyone was laughing. Behind the glass barrier on the upper level, a tall man stood still. Lucas Dalton, inmate, age 35, cell 14, a former soldier. A man who didn't speak unless he had to. A man most avoided without needing to be told why. He had scars, some visible, some buried so deep no razor could reach them. He had seen boys like Ethan before, and he had seen what happened to them when no one intervened. Ethan's assigned cell was 3 corridors away from Lucas's, but fate or maybe cruelty made their paths cross that first afternoon. As Ethan stumbled into the dining hall, the weight of hundreds of eyes pressed against his skin like stones. He didn't know the rules yet, didn't know which tables were off limits, didn't know how much eye contact was too much. He sat at the wrong spot. A man twice his size yanked him back by the collar. Another knocked his tray to the floor. Laughter again. Always the laughter. Ethan scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with a mixture of fear and humiliation. Lucas didn't move from where he sat alone at the edge of the room, but his eyes, cold and steady, tracked every detail. When the guards pretended not to see, he did. When others turned away, he didn't. He stayed there long after Ethan had been pushed, ridiculed, and left to clean the mess on his hands and knees. He watched. That night, Ethan lay on the thin mattress in his cell, silent tears soaking into the pillow. Every muscle in his body ached, not just from the abite, but from the terror of knowing this was just day one beats. His hands trembled as he touched the spot where his hair used to fall. He didn't feel like a person anymore. He felt like an object broken, discarded. In cell 14, Lucas sat with his back against the wall. His cellmate snored on the top bunk, but Lucas remained wide awake. The image of Ethan shaking, shamed, and utterly alone played over in his mind like a loop that wouldn't stop. He had made a promise once, long ago, and though he'd failed to keep it then, something deep in his gut whispered maybe this time. He didn't have to. Stay tuned for part 2, where the silence breaks and the past begins to unravel. If this story touched you, subscribe to Heart Story for more stories of survival, redemption, and second chances. In prison, nothing goes unnoticed, not even silence, especially not silence broken by choice. The rumors started by breakfast the next day. Ethan didn't know it yet. He was too focused on surviving, on avoiding eyes that looked through him like he was already a target, not a person. His hands still trembled when he held the metal tray, still unsure whether he should sit at all or simply eat standing against the wall. He had learned enough in 24 hours to know there were no second chances when it came to first impressions behind bars. But it didn't matter where he sat that morning, because he never made it to the table. 3 men blocked his path, older, heavier, with the kind of smiles that didn't touch their eyes. They didn't need to say anything. The message was clear. Ethan stepped back, tray wobbling in his grip. One of them shoved him hard enough for the tray to crash onto the floor. Food splattered everywhere. The guards looked over and looked away. That's when it happened. From the far side of the room, a single voice cut through the noise. Enough. The room froze. Utensils stopped clinking. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The men who had cornered Ethan turned slowly. So did Ethan. Lucas Dalton was standing, not towering or threatening, just standing. For a man who never spoke, the single word carried more weight than any shout. He didn't move closer. He didn't raise his voice again. But the way he looked at them was enough. Something in his expression, quiet, coiled, unreadable, made even the boldest of the trio step back. Like they had reached for fire and realized, too late, it burned. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the man he'd only seen from a distance. He didn't know whether to say thank you or just run. In the end, he did neither. Lucas turned and sat back down, as if nothing had happened. But the message had been sent. By afternoon, the whispers had begun. Why him? Why would Lucas do that for some pretty boy fresh off the bus? He never lifts a finger for anyone. Never has. Ethan heard it, felt it. Even the guards seemed to be speculating. Their smirks now carried something else, curiosity mixed with suspicion. Protection wasn't free in prison. It always meant something. But Lucas never approached him, never asked for anything. That only made it worse, or better. Ethan couldn't decide. He finally gathered the courage to speak with Lucas that evening. Near the library carts in the recreation yard, he walked up slowly, the gravel crunching beneath his thin shoes. "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice barely audible. "For earlier, I didn't know you would." "Don't thank me," Lucas interrupted, not looking at him. "You remind me of someone I failed to protect." The words hit harder than Ethan expected. Lucas's voice wasn't angry, just tired. He didn't elaborate. Just turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing there with a weight he didn't understand, yet pressing into his chest. Days passed, and slowly a strange rhythm formed. Lucas didn't speak often, but when he did, it mattered. He began pointing things out to Ethan, subtly, quietly, as they crossed paths. Which guards to avoid, which prisoners were unstable, which corners of the yard were blind to the cameras, how to move without drawing attention, how to stay quiet but not invisible, how to survive without becoming someone else. Ethan listened, absorbed every word like it was a lifeline. Because it was. Lucas never smiled, never asked questions, but he watched how Ethan clenched his fists when cornered, how he swallowed his pride instead of retaliating, how he refused to become what the place tried to make him. In return, Ethan followed every piece of advice. He stopped crying, stopped shaking. He still looked out of place, but something in his posture had changed. A kind of steel had started forming beneath the fear. Still, he didn't understand. Why him? Why would a man like Lucas, a man others feared without fully knowing, care he would learn the answer soon enough? But for now, Ethan only knew one thing. In a place built to strip you down, someone had chosen to see him, and that changed everything. It started with a storm, not the kind that knocked out power or flooded the yard, but the kind that turned metal walls into drums and made the air taste like rust. Rain hammered the roof that night. Most prisoners curled under thin blankets, waiting for sleep or morning, whichever came first. But Ethan stayed awake. Lucas hadn't come out for dinner, hadn't shown up at rec hour either. Whispers floated in the corridor. Something about a fever, about him refusing meds, about him not trusting the infirmary. Ethan hesitated outside cell 14, gripping the small plastic cup of water and a folded packet of aspirin he'd managed to convince a guard to hand over. He knocked gently on the bars. No answer. He called his name once. Still silence. Then he slipped inside. Lucas was lying on the lower bunk, fully clothed, sweat dampening his shirt, his breath shallow. Ethan stepped closer, unsure if he would be shouted at or worse, but Lucas didn't move. His eyes were half closed, jaw clenched, body still like stone. Ethan crouched beside the bed, placing the water and aspirin near Lucas's hand. Then he noticed something. A corner of a photograph peeked from beneath the pillow. Ethan didn't mean to look. He just saw it, just for a moment. But that moment hit him like a fist to the chest. The boy in the photo had soft blonde hair, a gentle smile. His build was slim, his features delicate. His eyes, bright and blue, were almost identical to Ethan's. It was like looking into a mirror warped by time. Lucas stirred. Ethan backed away quickly, apologizing under his breath. But the man didn't reach for anger. He reached for the photo, held it in his palm, eyes fixed not on Ethan, but on the face in the picture. He sat up slowly, like the weight of the past made his movements heavier than illness ever could. "That's Jamie," Lucas said quietly. "My brother." The storm outside softened. But in the silence that followed, Ethan could feel the crackle of something raw, something not often spoken aloud in places like this. He was 19 when he died. Lucas continued. He was soft, kind, brighter than me in every way. He was also gay, and the world didn't like that. Ethan didn't breathe, didn't blink. They used to call him names at school and push him in the hallway. At home, my father told him to toughen up. My mother just cried behind closed doors. I thought he'd grow out of it. That was the lie I told myself, that if I stayed distant, he'd become stronger. Lucas looked up now, his eyes not cold, not dead, but hollowed out by guilt. One night, I came home drunk, had a fight with my commanding officer that day. The kind of anger you carry in your fists. Jamie tried to talk to me. I told him to shut up, to stop acting weak, to be a man. The words came slower now, jagged. That was the last thing I ever said to him. He paused. He hung himself that night. The silence that followed was unbearable. Ethan sat on the floor beside the bunk, his heart pounding so hard he thought the guards would hear it through the walls. I ended up in a bar fight 2 days later, Lucas said. A man made a joke about gay kids. I broke his jaw. They said I was unstable, angry, dangerous. They weren't wrong. His hand clutched the photograph, almost trembling. I didn't protect Jamie, not when it mattered. Ethan looked at him then, truly looked. Lucas wasn't the unshakable shadow everyone feared. He was a man stitched together by regret, a brother still speaking to ghosts. Lucas turned to Ethan slowly. When I saw you, your face, your eyes, but it was like he walked back in through the gate. But this time, I wasn't going to stand still. The moment didn't need more words. Ethan didn't reach out, didn't offer comfort. He just sat there, close enough that the silence between them finally felt like something shared, not something endured. Outside, the storm passed, but inside cell 14, something finally shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the start of something just as rare behind prison walls. Understanding. The week after the storm, things changed. Lucas had gone quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't cold. It was careful, like a man waiting for something he couldn't name. He started making fewer appearances in the yard, spent more time reading, and only nodded at Ethan in passing. It wasn't distance, it was preparation. Ethan didn't ask questions. He followed the rhythm Lucas had taught him. Eyes open, mouth shut. Never stay still too long in one place. But under that routine, there was unease, a tension that hadn't been there before. Then came the morning the guards entered Ethan's cell. It was early, too early. He had just finished folding his blanket when they came in without a word. One reached under the mattress, another checked the pillow. They moved with purpose, like men who already knew what they would find. Ethan froze as one of them pulled a short, sharpened piece of metal from beneath the bed frame. A shank. The air seemed to vanish from the room. "We found something in your bed," the guard said flatly. Ethan tried to speak, but his voice didn't come out. His hands trembled. His mouth moved, but no sound followed. It didn't matter. They didn't listen. He was handcuffed and led down the corridor as prisoners stared from their cells. Some laughed, others whispered. No one stepped forward. No one questioned it. Solitary confinement swallowed him whole. A cell no wider than his outstretched arms. No window, just concrete, steel, and silence. The light buzzed above him without mercy, never turning off. Hours became days. Sleep came in fragments. Meals were slid through a flap in the door, untouched. There was no hearing, no appeal, no proof. Ethan knew who had done it. He didn't need to see the faces. It was the same group Lucas had warned him about, the same men who had marked him on day one, who now saw the bond between him and Lucas as an opportunity or a threat. And now Lucas was gone, transferred, moved to another facility. The official explanation was security concerns, but in prison, explanations didn't matter. Actions did. Ethan sat on the floor, his back against the wall, counting the cracks above the door again and again, wondering if the silence would break him before the injustice did. Then came the whisper, not in his ear, but through the cracks of rumor, through the pipework of gossip, through the way even silence in prison finds a way to echo. Lucas had demanded a hearing before his transfer, not for himself, but for Ethan. He had gathered names, he had spoken aloud, to the warden, to internal affairs. He had exposed the setup. He had taken the fall. Ethan pressed his forehead against the door. He remembered the photo, Jamie's eyes, Lucas's promise. I didn't protect him, but I can do it right this time. Now, Lucas was paying the price for that promise. And Ethan, trapped in solitary, the ceiling pressing down harder each day, could do nothing but wait. No one came to explain. No one came to apologize. But one night through the meal slot, a new guard slipped a folded scrap of paper onto his tray. No words, just a number written in pen, 14. It wasn't over. Not yet. Ethan never found out how long he spent in solitary. Time didn't tick in minutes. It bled into itself. The walls began to pulse with breathless silence, until even his thoughts dulled to static. He didn't speak. He didn't cry out. He just existed, suspended between punishment and waiting. Then one morning, the door opened without warning. No explanation, no paperwork read aloud, just a nod from a guard and a murmured, "You're out." Back in general population, things had shifted. Eyes followed him, but not with the same venom. Some nodded. Most looked away. The ones who had set him up were gone, reassigned, punished quietly, never publicly. That was how prison handled truth quietly, behind closed doors, never admitting fault. A week later, Ethan stood at the front gate of the facility, released early for good behavior and procedural review. No one mentioned the real reason, but he knew Lucas. It wasn't a guard who told him. It was a man with tired eyes and a whisper. He said Lucas had submitted an appeal, not for himself, but for Ethan, along with witness accounts, timelines, and something else Ethan would never know. It had worked, but it had cost Lucas his place in that prison. As he walked out into the open air, Ethan didn't feel free. Not yet. His hand clutched the only belongings returned to him: worn shoes, a thin coat, and a small envelope. It had been handed to him discreetly by one of the older guards who never spoke. "He said you'd know what to do with this," he said. Ethan sat on a bench just beyond the gate, under a tree shedding its last autumn leaves. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a folded letter, creased but clean. The handwriting was firm, familiar. Ethan, I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye. I've never been good at endings. Jamie was the light in my world. You were the echo of that light, but brighter in your own way. When I failed him, I thought I'd lost my right to care. I thought my silence was safety. But the truth is, silence buried me. Watching you reminded me that protecting someone doesn't always mean standing in front of them. Sometimes it means standing behind them, when no one else will. You were never weak. You were never what they tried to name you. You were always enough. I couldn't save my brother, but I could help you walk out of here whole. If you live well, you live for 2 people now, maybe 3. Lucas, S. You left something behind. Ethan looked inside the envelope again. Beneath the letter was a cloth folded tightly into a square. He unfolded it slowly. Breath held. A handkerchief, off-white, faded at the corners, and embroidered with a single number in navy thread. But it wasn't just a cell number. It was a promise, a memory, a second chance stitched into fabric. He held the handkerchief against his chest. Eyes closed, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves above him, and for the first time in months, Ethan let himself exhale. Freedom wasn't just walking out the gates. It was carrying something sacred with you. Not guilt, not fear, but the proof that someone believed you were worth saving. He rose slowly and walked forward, into sunlight, into silence, into life. If someone had once stood up for you when no one else did, what would you say to them now? Tell us in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Heart Story, where every scar has a voice and every silence finds its answer.